So now let's walk through an example for running our two-tailed repeated measures t-tests. And I have up here starting for us the data for this problem. We don't really have a story problem. We're just going to run a two-tailed test with this data, see if the first set of measurements is significantly different then. Could be higher or lower than the second. And we're doing this because there's absolutely no prep work already done for us in this. We are starting from absolute scratch. So we've got to do everything ourselves. So we have our first column for participants. Obviously, we're lettering them instead of numbering them because we don't want to confuse them with data. A, B, C, D, E, F. That is 6 folks. So that's the first thing to take note of, is that the sample size is 6. Next thing we want to do is we want to get rid of these raw scores and we want to turn them into difference scores. Now notice something I've done here, which is very common. It's the way the book does it as well. X sub 1, the first set of raw scores, X sub 2, the second set of raw scores. Tables of data almost always show you the things in chronological order. But remember, when we're going to subtract out to get our difference scores, it's the second score minus the first score. So we're actually subtracting backwards on this table. So participant A, they got a raw score of 7 on the first measure. Then they got a treatment, and then their score went up to 8. So their difference score, 8 minus 7, is 1. The second person got a 2, and then their score went up to a 9. So their score went up 7 points. The next person's score went up 2 points. The next person's score went up 2 points. The next person's score went up 1 point. The next person's score went up 5 points. Different scores, again, can be negative. If the scores went down after the treatment, we might well have a negative sign behind one or more of those. That's a common area of mistakes for students. Imagine for a minute that for participant E, these numbers were reversed. It was a 6 over here and a 5 over there. Well, their difference score would be a -1. Students will often remember to subtract it the correct way, but then they'll forget there's a negative in this column, which will screw up all the rest of their math. Now, we've also put a column up here for squared difference scores. Why? Because we know we're going to need those to compute sums of squares. So we're just putting it up there right now to be able to get all the prep work done, to get all those prep calculations done so we can start the 4 steps. So now we're just squaring our values. So 1 squared is 1, 7 squared is 49, 2 squared is 4, 2 squared is 4, 1 squared is 1, 5 squared is 25. So now the last thing we want to do is sort of working within this table sort of format. We want for these last 2 columns, we want to sum them up because again, we're going to need that for other calculations. So the sum of the difference scores, 1 plus 7 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 5, just add up the column. That adds up to 18 points. And now we need the same thing, the sum of these squared difference scores. So 1 plus 49 plus 4 plus 4 plus 1 plus 25 equals 84. Now we've gotten everything out of the chart that we need out of the chart. So we can get rid of the chart, but we still need to know these 3 things because we haven't finished the prep work yet. Remember, prep work is we need the mean of different scores, and we need the sums of squares of different scores, and we need the variance of the different scores. So I'm going to get rid of the table. We don't need the table anymore because we don't care about these raw scores anymore. And we've already summarized our different scores and squared different scores over there. So, continuing in our prep calculations, go ahead and label that, that's what we've been doing. The first thing I said we need to do is to get the sample mean of difference scores. Well, that's the sum of different scores divided by the number of difference scores. Well, the sum of different scores we just computed a moment ago was 18. And the number of different scores is 6. So the mean of the different scores was 3 points. And again, that could be positive or negative. If the scores typically went up, it'll be positive. If the average performance went down, that would be negative. The next thing we need is our sums of squares of different scores. So again, that's the summation of different scores squared minus the squaring of the summation of different scores over the number of different scores. Well, again, all we have to do is plug and play. The summation of squared different scores, that's right there, 84. The summation of different scores is 18. And again, the number of different scores is 6. So square your 18, divide that by 6, and then subtract that from 84, and you should get the answer of 30. Remember, sums of squares have to be positive. We can't get a negative here. We can't up there. The other thing I mentioned for prep was getting the different scores, and of course we already did that in the table itself. So at this point, our prep work is complete. We got all the different scores we needed, and we used them to get the mean of the different scores and to get the sums of squares of the different scores. So now we're actually ready to start the full-on 4 steps. And we'll do that in the next video clip.